This is the Grounded Podcast, episode 3, with Echo Charles, Dave Berke, and me, Jocko Willink. What's happening?
What's up?
Oh, this is your first time on the Grounded Podcast.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to say good evening or nothing like this, because you didn't say good evening to me.
No.
See what I'm saying? I'm just going to say, how's it?
We're trying
That's what I would normally
establish a little bit more of a relaxed environment.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
we're not starting all formal.
Yes.
Good evening, which is a formal. Let's face it, I don't even say good evening to you. Well, I guess I say sometimes jokingly, but I wouldn't normally say that to you in real life.
Yeah, makes sense.
So now we're not saying it here.
Okay.
To you or Dave.
Okay.
So instead I said, what's up?
Right.
That's actually what I said, right?
And if you could feel it, if you probably felt it was like threw me for a loop a little bit. Yeah.
Because you got the headphones on. We're in the space.
Yeah, it
right?
sounded weird. Yeah. It sounded weird.
So, Grounded. Well, you haven't heard any yet, Dave, because they haven't been released yet.
That's right.
Yeah, so the deal is, like, you know how when we started recording the other podcast today, but before we started recording, we talked, and I said, hey guys, we just talked for 48 minutes before kicking off the podcast. And then I said, I really wish we would have recorded all that, because what we were talking about was good stuff.
Yeah.
It was stuff that I am learning when you guys are talking to me. You're learning when I'm talking to you. It's like one of those situations.
Yeah.
And you and I, Echo, have been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about training, whether we're talking about just life, whether we're talking about Hawaii 5-0.
Sure. Hell yeah.
We're talking about, relatively important stuff.
Yeah.
Or at least interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So the other thing is there's like the certain level of expectation and standard. There's a standard for the legit numbered Jocko podcast that I'm not looking to lower the standard.
Makes sense.
And I'm not looking to deviate from the path with that podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm being held accountable by the precedent. You can't have John Stryker Meyer on that podcast and then just say, well, we're just going to sit around and talk about whatever, right? It doesn't work.
No, I think you're right.
I'm not going to have Dakota Meyer on and then just go, we're going to do this next podcast about,
you for sure can't talk like that.
I definitely can't talk like that. So that's what this podcast is. Mm-hmm. This podcast is, hey, there's things that aren't quite as heavy, right? We're not talking rape of Nanking on this podcast, hopefully. I mean, it could come up, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to talk about some other things, some other interests in my life, in your life, in everyone's life. Because the first two, you weren't even here, Echo, because you were busy, like super busy in Kauai.
Yep.
Just being on vacation. And a 1-month vacation.
Yes.
Dave, have you ever taken a 1-month vacation?
I've actually never heard of a 1-month vacation.
A 1-month
I've definitely
vacation.
not been on a 1-month vacation.
1-month vacation.
Well,
how? And you were able to adapt to that mentally?
Well,
did your mind shut off at all?
No, it did not, actually.
You stayed in the game.
Well, here's the thing. So, I didn't see it as a vacation necessarily. It was a trip. It was a relocation temporarily. And, that's sort of it,
So you were there working.
Did some work.
Did some work.
Did some exercise,
Back-to-back squats, apparently.
Back-to-back squats.
Dave, 1-month vacation.
Yeah.
Is that something you're looking forward to? Is that something you're negotiating in your head with your wife? Is she talking about the 1-month vacation?
Have you ever taken a 1-month trip?
No.
He was in the military. He was in the military for 20 years, bro.
Right, well,
24 years.
There you go.
Not on my own. I mean, I've been places for more than a month in my time in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, he was places for more than 1 month. Ramadi.
Have you ever been to Kauai at all?
I've been to Kauai.
Have you been to Kauai before?
No.
Well, I rest my case. Because once you go to Kauai, you're going to understand, boom, I can be here 1 month.
Minimum
bring my
1 month
laptop,
scenario.
Bring my arguably, yeah, I think. Wait, when did you go to Kauai?
When I was a little kid. I was probably 13.
Yeah, so you don't understand.
How long did you stay for? 34 days?
I don't know, probably 4.
Well, Next time you go, you're going to understand. And, that's the way I look at it.
Okay.
So it was, like I said, not a vacation. It was a trip.
Do you feel recharged now? Do you feel recharged?
I feel the same.
No different.
Well, I've actually explained this to you a few times. Maybe you too, good deal, Dave. Where when I'm here, I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to go to Kauai. Not necessarily to get away from work or nothing like that. That's why I don't see it as a vacation. Just like to go there in that environment and stuff. I grew up there, whatever. So just to be there. Can't wait. Can't wait for the beach, all that stuff. Bring my computer so I can do my work. I can't wait to work there. You see what I'm saying? And then when I go there, I can't wait to get back to like work harder so I can go back to Kauai. See what I'm saying? So it's kind of like maybe a psychological, environmental vacation, maybe. But one kind of plays off the other.
My whole life, my work has been what I do for fun, which is kind of crazy.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
I mean, because, I didn't do dishwashing when I was a kid for fun. No, I did that for whatever, $4.50 an hour.
Right. But
I didn't work
career-wise,
at Wendy's for fun. No. But as soon as I joined the military, that was I did what I did for work is what I would be wanting to do for fun anyways. Yeah. Not just the fact that you're shooting machine guns. Because that's fun for sure.
But not
because of that either.
Let's face it.
But even coming into work on the weekends.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do this weekend? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to go and we're going to go to work. We're going to work out. We're going to mess with our gear. Yeah. We made our own gear back then. So you're kind of just into it. You probably couldn't. You probably weren't even allowed to do that in the Marine Corps aviation community.
Yeah, no, not at all. But I know what you're talking about. I only had one job in my entire time in the Marine Corps where I felt like anything I was doing was a chore.
What job was that?
Working at the Pentagon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying all your other jobs were all
building.
fun.
Echo, when you're in the military, they call the Pentagon, they just call it the building. So someone's like, oh, yeah, I got to fly. I'm going to the building. As if it's the most ominous, horrible place.
Yeah. Or just
how long were you at the Pentagon for?
Just under 2 years.
So I had a job. I was the Admiral's aide. So it's the same thing. I was the Admiral's aide for about 13 months. And interestingly, I mean, I can't say that I liked it, right?
Sure.
Luckily, the Admiral I worked for was a great guy, and he was really teaching me a lot. He was explaining things to me. He was saying, hey, here's what's going on here. Because you don't know, I was a young lieutenant, just got back from Iraq, platoon commander, done, tour, and he was, he must have been in for 25 something years at that point, and he's the admiral in charge of all the SEALs. And so he was definitely trying to help me understand the big picture, sure, as they say. And he was also just a nice guy. And he was also a guy that would say, how does this help the SEAL platoons? Like, he was looking out for the SEAL platoons. He wasn't looking out for his career or anything like that. He was looking out for the SEAL platoons. But I had to wear a uniform every day, which I was not used to, because I used to, for lack of a word, I guess I used to brag about the fact that I was a 34-year-old man making $84,000 a year as a lieutenant in the Navy, and I didn't wear a shirt at work. Hey man, we're grown men in professional jobs wearing shorts, a pair of boots, and no shirt at work. That was the deal. That was the deal. So I like that. Now, when I was Admiral's aide, no. You were strapping it on at 6 o'clock. You were done working out because you had East Coast, the chief of naval operations. He's on the East Coast. He wants to talk early.
Yeah.
So you're there early. Be there all day. You have to stay until the boss is done. And so that was how do you describe it? That job was not fun. No. But it was as fun as it could be because the boss was fun and because he was teaching me a lot and I was learning a lot. There was another Navy captain who retired while I was there. There was a few senior Navy captains that were great guys, taught me a ton, great relationships, and helped me for the rest of my career and helped me to this day. One of the guys who was the EA to the Admiral, he helped task Unit Bruiser above and beyond just while we were tasking a bruiser. This is a guy that when tasking a bruiser would have some kind of issue down the line, like we wanted to get Mark Lee's and Ryan Job's and Mikey Mansour's machine guns retired and put onto the SEAL Team 3 quarterdeck. And there was like some staff person that said, well, those guns, those weapons, 2 of them aren't retired yet, or they still have rounds. And we'll just give you some other guns that are already used up. And that's not the right answer.
Yeah.
That is not the right answer. You don't say, oh yeah, we're going to put Mike Mansour's gear in here, but we're going to put some other weapon. No one will know. It's like, no, you don't do that. And so, like this retired captain who's the EA who then worked at the command said, I said, hey boss, this is what's going on. Can you help me? And he's like, yeah. And he would just frame things up, and problems would get solved because they were the right thing. I wasn't out there asking for like personal favor.
Looking for the hookup.
Yeah, no. It's like, this is the right thing to do for the community.
Totally.
And for our fallen brethren, that should be memorialized correctly. So, yeah. So that was a job that was beneficial for my education and for my growth, but I didn't exactly like going to work every day.
Yeah, like if you didn't have that job, you wouldn't be, calling up the admiral and be like, hey, you want to hang out and do admin stuff or whatever,
No, I wouldn't mind hanging out with you. Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
I mean, the work, whatever your role was.
I would call the admiral and say, hey, you want to go surfing? But I wouldn't call him and say, hey, you want to go and put together a PowerPoint brief this weekend? Because that sounds like fun.
Correct. Yeah,
no,
exactly.
None of that.
Yeah, but if you go home now, there's a good chance you'll be wearing shorts, no shirt.
Yes.
Maybe not boots. Probably flip-flops.
Well, Dave, can we do Skype meetings at Echelon Front? And there's a decent percentage of time that, it's a video conference.
And he has no shirt on?
Correct.
Yeah.
This guy. Yeah. All right. Cool.
So I still brag. Now I'm even older. Now I'm 47 years old. Still trying not to wear a shirt at work. However, if I do come and speak at your company, I will wear a shirt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, good idea.
We try and keep it professional on the road.
Yeah, good idea. Jocko.
Dave, so you've been with Echelon Front for how long?
Almost 3 years, man. 2.5. My first event with you was in November of 16, so that'll be 3 years in November.
And you moved out to California.
I did. I moved out to California.
Good move.
You're in my AO.
Absolutely.
This is a good place to be.
Dude, this place is awesome.
You're getting used to watching the sunsets at night.
Yes, I am.
Is there something that does to your mentality that's a positive thing?
Yeah, there is. You know what living out here and watching the sunset does? It makes being gone even easier.
Yeah.
It makes being gone, and when I'm on the road, and I'm on the road a lot, it makes that even easier than it was. Because I know that what I'm missing, my family is not missing because they're there for it, and it's good to go.
The sun setting into the ocean. Do you see that on Kauai?
Yes, sir. You do.
And does it have a positive effect on you? Does it allow you to relax a little
crazy
bit?
Or what? Do I see? Bruh, everywhere you look is all ocean.
I thought you were going to say, no, I'm too busy working.
No, you don't see it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He was grinding at his computer.
Super unobstructed sunrise, sunset, wherever you want to go. Because, you figure Kauai is like an island, and it's like a circle.
Well, it's not like an island.
I meant like a circle. It is an island. Yeah. So, sunset.
So you go watch the sunrise, and then you go watch the sunset.
Whatever you like.
If you could have a house that was either or, which would it be?
Sunset, I think. Yeah, only because I don't, do the sunrise
You're
thing
not super.
as often, we'll say. But yeah, sunset for sure.
Check.
You? Sunset, right?
I would take the sunset.
Yeah. I don't know. Here's a weird thing though. Sunrise, I'd say just the fact that I'm not awake for that most of the time, that's the main factor. Because when you watch the sunrise, it's I think it's just as like, I don't know. Yeah, just
it is. And I'll tell you what's cool. When you watch the sunrise, when you look west at the ocean and the sun rises, you're seeing this now, Dave, from your house. You see the sunrise in the east, but you watch the sunrise on the ocean, it's still... Yeah. It's even more awesome actually than the sunrise. It's at least as awesome. The way you get the colors
Yeah.
It's pretty lit.
Yeah. I got a good setup right now.
So you started Echelon Front 2.5 years ago. At what point did you start training the jiu-jitsu?
I started training after muster. I was almost there for not quite a full year. The following summer after I joined is when I started training on my own. So I went to the first two musters. I didn't stay. And I didn't stay for the jiu-jitsu. I got home or for whatever reason, and I didn't do jiu-jitsu until after the third muster. That's literally the first time I'd ever rolled, ever trained.
Was it surprising?
Yeah, totally.
Were you less competent and capable than you thought you would be as a human?
Less competent. I didn't know what was going on. And I wasn't training with a bunch of black belts either.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
So, although I will say I didn't walk in there like supremely confident. So I didn't have these high, lofty expectations how I was going to do.
Got it.
But I remember walking away for the first time trying to piece together a little shred in my mind of what you had been talking about. And so that was the first experience with that.
Yeah, because you had heard us talking about it on the podcast for a year.
Totally. You guys talked about it a lot. I had heard stories about it a lot, and I heard certainly you talk about it, and I just didn't have any connection to it. And I don't want to say that I like actively avoided it, but it was, to be pretty honest, it was at first something that I was like, nah, that's not for me. I'm not going to do. You know.
It's one of those things where if you can perceive it in a way that it's like, well, that doesn't really connect with me. Like, I can get that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I've ever had anything like that where I had a turnaround in my brain of like, oh, this is something that I just don't, that's not for me, into like, okay, I get this and I'm about it. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe video editing, which I've started doing now.
What do you edit on? Or what program you use?
My iPad.
So it's like iMovie?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Good starting point.
You'll be seeing some
major works coming out of your iMovie setup.
I figured some things out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I dig
how
it.
to do it. But anyways, I just get tired of relying on people that, go on long vacations.
Yeah, man. No, man, you're the man. 100%.
I'm working on my effects.
No, you're not, because you're using iMovie, and there are no effects really in iMovie.
Yeah. No, don't get all like crazy serious with me, dude.
You're the one who started.
Look at you.
All right, man.
Take it easy.
All right.
Your job is safe, kind of.
Yeah, it's hard.
So the you looked at it as something like, that's cool. Those guys are doing something that seems, that's fine. That's not really my thing, though.
Exactly.
Did the first muster change your mind? Did that first experience with jiu-jitsu say, oh, you know what, this might be my thing? Or were you like, no, this, I need to get into this? Or at what point did you say, no, I'm in?
At what point? I don't think I was really mentally until I started to, so I started training, but almost sort of like mechanically. Look, to be honest with you, the reason I started training after that was to sort of fit in, just to kind of assimilate a little bit. I always kind of had the mindset of like, look, if this is what my bros are doing, I'm just going to do what my bros are doing because it's a good idea, because that's what my bros are doing. I'm going to do the same thing. So I did that. That was kind of the only real reason I did it at first was, hey, there's a lot of talk about it. Everybody else is doing it. I'm not going to be the guy that's not doing it. And I started to do it because of that. That's what got me onto the mats. But I started training with a coach that was really good. This is out in Virginia. And I remember the first time that I actually was able to do something to somebody else that he taught me to do. And the feeling was the first time I'd had a feeling that reminded me of being an airplane, doing something to somebody in an airplane and how good that felt. And that was the first time I ever made the connection of, this reminds me of other things that I've done that I really, really like. And that was what that's the real hook. And so up until that point, that was after the muster, a couple months of not doing anything, then making the connection to the coach, going and starting to train, that fall or whatever it was. And then still just being sort of very mechanical thing, like, you guys are doing it, I'm going to do it. And then at some point having that experience, I'm like, and I think I actually might have called you and talked to you about it. I know I talked to JP about it. I'm like, hey, dude, this just happened. I'm not bragging, but I just did this thing that I learned, and I did it to another dude on the mat, and he tapped out. Yeah. And not just like I won, it was that feeling. And ever since then, that's when the trajectory kind of kind of took off for me in my mind.
So I've said on this podcast, someone said like, how do I know? I just don't like jiu-jitsu. Like, when have I had enough? And I said, you should do jiu-jitsu until you submit someone with something that you've learned. I don't know if I said this thing you've learned yet, but I said, because that is when you submit somebody, if that feeling doesn't compel you to want to do it more, then jiu-jitsu isn't for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I personally, for me, all I needed to do was get submitted.
Oh, yeah.
The first time I rolled and got submitted, I said, okay, someone else knows something that they can hold over me, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do everything in my power to learn as much as I can that I become good at this game.
And that's, I don't know if you've always been like this, but that's like a big picture way of thinking of it, which I don't think that comes just naturally for everybody, because like we could all sort of figure that out, and maybe, but at the time when you're in like a stressful environment, and stressful, sure, relative, I get it, but when the first time you do jiu-jitsu and you're rolling and whatever, it's kind of stressful. And then someone submits you, usually most of us are like, yeah, okay, I just got submitted by this martial art. I knew it was a martial art, and I lost in a martial art like little training session. Like, what's awesome about that? Directly, So you're just left with a feeling, oh yeah, I got tapped out. Oh, I got tapped out by somebody little, Okay, that's not a good feeling unless you think big picture and you're like, wait, I can learn this. All I got to do is learn this, but you're not thinking, oh, let me learn this stuff automatically. You're left with more of the feeling part of it, like, oh yeah, I just lost. But and a lot of us, if we go into jiu-jitsu with intention, we can manage to think big picture. If we just stick it out for that, that week or whatever, until you're kind of out of the woods. But the first time you tap someone out, same mindset, you're just left with that feeling. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like I actually tapped another guy out with this like jiu-jitsu. I'm a complete white belt, by the way. And it's like, it's just a direct demonstration of, oh, this thing really works. And that happened to me. And it wasn't necessarily the first guy I tapped out, but it was the first time I went to another gym. And you remember Tyrone Glover?
Yeah.
So he used to be an instructor down at a gym in PB. Might have even been City Boxing in PB. I forget.
Yes, he was at City Boxing in PB for a
Okay,
while.
so it was a City Boxing. Okay, so he was like, yeah, man, come down and train. So I'm like, cool, complete white belt. Total 100% white belt.
God, he must have just...
Well, I didn't roll with him.
Oh, okay.
He was just like, come train and whatever, just jump in the drills. And it was, the typical drill, old school. I haven't seen it for a while, where there's like lines, like 5 lines of people and one guy out in front of each line.
Okay.
And it's essentially a king of the hill situation.
Yeah,
so everyone lines up, you roll with one guy. If you get tapped out, you go to the back of the line. If you win, you stay up front. Yep. It was one of those deals. And I'm in the line and I go, and this guy up front was big. He wasn't like an advanced guy. He was a white belt too, but so he was up there in the front. I get to the front and he's still rolling. And I went and I rolled with him, and like I got him, and I got that feeling again. But it's like a rejuvenating feeling. It's more than like what I was used to at my own gym, because now I'm with strangers, and this stuff still works. So like that feeling, is way more compelling. That's why I think that just thinking about it with that initial primary experience, that feeling. If you do it, and when you tap someone out, like that's gonna make you stick with it.
That's a good place to separate if you actually are gonna like jiu-jitsu, or if you are probably not gonna make it through. Like, you're probably not gonna become a blue belt, a purple belt, a brown belt, a black belt.
I don't know that I can even get there mentally to be like, to tap, like the first time you ever tap somebody out and be like, still not for me.
I don't even remember the first time I tapped somebody out.
Yeah, I don't think I remember it.
I do.
Actually, I told you we did jiu-jitsu just from doing the tapes. Watching tapes.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that what do you call, trial by fire kind of scenario like you did, just jumping into a real class. Like we did it. We were doing it with, my friends and stuff in Hawaii, just watching the tapes and then doing it and tapping each other out. So I guess I didn't really get that first tap out experience necessarily. I feel like that one I just said at Tyrone's place was my first tap out. That was the big one. I was already addicted to it from the beginning, but I remember that feeling, and I remember thinking like, when people were like, oh, I don't like jiu-jitsu, or when you were saying that, when you first tapped someone out, I remember thinking back for myself on that experience. Yeah. And that feeling.
What about your ego, Dave? Was that even, or you just like totally, you were good with it?
Yeah,
you're like, whatever.
Dude, to be honest with you, man, that is
played zero.
It's zero. And it's zero, probably two reasons. One is my time in the Marine Corps. That's actually something I figured out in aviation. I kind of cracked the code on that before my career ended, of just losing enough and getting beat by guys enough to just never really let it run away with me. You know, like I had an ego, but I never, certainly towards the latter half of my career, I never literally let it run away from me. So kind of learning to keep that in check was something I brought with me. And I wasn't afraid of that part of it. And to be honest with you, losing, it's funny to say this, losing doesn't bother me on the mat when I'm doing it, because I feel like I'm learning. So like the learning curve is so steep. Losing bothers me when I'm good at something way more than it bothers me when I'm not good at something. And the thing about jiu-jitsu, which has been unlike other things, it's like the learning curve, you're never not learning a whole bunch of things. Certainly for me, as junior as I am in this, I haven't reached there's no plateaus or no levels where I'm like, okay, I should be good at this at all. So I don't have any expectations. If I lose to someone who is less experienced than me, it bothers me a lot. But not from like an ego, keep my ego in check. That really, to be honest with you, man, that's never really been a big factor for me, just because of what has happened in my life enough that's just not a concern.
Yeah.
It's more of what frustrates me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
From dealing with a lot of team guys, you inherently, you have, like, let's face it, a team guy does not want to lose in a physical altercation.
Sure.
That is a big deal. They have a reputation, from a perceived reputation from other people, and they have a reputation of their own in their own head of what they are capable of. And that's why it was oftentimes very challenging to get team guys to get in the game. Why? Because they have a visualization or a vision of who they are, of what they're capable of, and that thing gets completely freaking shattered when you get caught in a triangle of a choke of a 142-pound woman, and you get tapped out. Like, I've seen that happen to SEALs getting triangled by a female. Hard to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so I think that happens, and then, SEALs are maybe a extreme example of that attitude, but many male human beings
for sure
have that attitude where they think, they have a vision of who they are, what they're capable of, and that vision gets completely and utterly destroyed.
Yeah. And that can happen, like, in a way, maybe on a smaller scale, that can happen every day, So, like, okay, you start as a white belt, and I kind of agree with you. I feel like I'm the same way with you. Like, when I was a white belt, even blue belt, like, where I understood that everyone's better than me pretty much. Mm-hmm. And you have these little hierarchies in the gym, where it's like, okay, this guy I train with a lot and I always beat him, even though we're the same belt or whatever. Yep. So if he beats you, it'll bother you, like just a little bit. It's just, a little hierarchy or whatever. But overall, the purple belt, when I'm like a white belt, he's better than me. Like, that's how it is. So of course he's going to tap me out. That doesn't bother me if he's smaller than me. He's better than me at jiu-jitsu, whatever. But when you make your way up and you're a purple belt now, you have expectations on yourself. Or if you're competing and you're winning and stuff like that, when you go back to the gym, and it exists. It exists that other people in the gym look at you as a purple belt or a guy with big muscles or a guy who wins tournaments or whatever. Be like, well, if I beat that guy, that sort of in a way means I'm good like him. You got a target on
your back.
Yes.
You got a target on your back.
And that exists. That's a real thing, And if you recognize that target on your back as being an official thing, like, hey, if you buy into the mentality, you can, and it's easy to do. It's easy to mentally slip and buy into it, where that'll influence your thoughts. So you're like, I'm this big purple belt now, kind of thing. But if I have a bad day or just get caught in something from a lower guy or whatever, you're kind of like, man, maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I shouldn't have a purple belt or whatever, and you start to doubt yourself.
Oh, I'll tell you right now, yeah, if I have a really bad day, I'll go home and be thinking about it. Even this day, I mean, even today, even at this age, in this time in jiu-jitsu, if I have a really bad day, it will definitely get into my head a little bit. And there's not too many things that get into my head, And I would say that's probably happened like 2 times in the last year where I've been like gone home and been thinking to myself, okay, you're not doing something right. You need to reassess how you're training. You need to start thinking about this. Yep. Like that's happened a couple times in the last year.
Bruh, that's good because it literally feels like that's me every single day. For real. Like even if I like do good all like in training, whatever that even means, because like a lot of time like the obvious thing to evaluate if you did good in training is if like you tap people out a lot, or if you tap a guy out that you don't really tap out, or you get the better of a guy who usually gets the better, like that's how you evaluate it most of the time. But there's so many unseen factors in your training every single day, that you just don't know about. Mm-hmm. And then, but no, you base it on like, oh yeah, freaking Jocko tapped me out like 10 times in a row today, and usually he only taps me out 2 or something like that. And you're like, man, I had a bad day. Or Jocko didn't tap me out at all today. Oh my gosh, I had this awesome day or whatever. But every single day there's some factor that I think is in my mind that it's like, man, I feel like I've been training for so long and I should have done better in that particular moment. You know? And I always have that. And I'm like driving home. And then I hear about like Greg McIntyre saying the same thing. And I'm like, oh, wait, he's been training longer than me. But it feels like you just go in like just completely stoic and you just go home and you're just done. Yeah,
that happens most of the time.
Yeah.
But occasionally, 2 times a year, something will happen where I'll just feel like, man, what I need to reevaluate what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I need to do a systems check. And I need to start stepping up my training.
It's so funny because what you're saying, like the words that you're saying right now are like describe my thoughts about post training. Like, it's not every day. I'm exaggerating there, but every week I would say. Or like when a guy you train with, like Noah, for example, like they'll hit little steps of like they'll get better real quick, just real quick. I think that's how all of our training is. Yeah. At some point, you do
a little jump,
and
or you stagnate,
What that's the game too for sure. And then when someone makes that jump on you, you're like, you just question your whole jiu-jitsu career. Yeah. It just throws it all upside down.
Yeah. But they have to do that, and that's how you end up improving. Because they did a jump, and now you're chasing them, and eventually you do a jump. Yeah. And you either catch or surpass them.
Hopefully, but,
Hopefully. Dave, something you said earlier, which was an interesting thing, and I'm writing another book. And in the book, I actually wrote a chapter about this, but you were talking about how, look, all of us were doing jiu-jitsu. So you were like, I'm going to do jiu-jitsu too. Like that's just what I'm going to do. I wrote this chapter in my new book, and I think the name of the chapter is Conform to Influence.
Totally.
And what I talk about when I was a new guy in the SEAL teams, and like I was like Mr. Hardcore. And I realized, wait a second, I'm actually creating a gap, a chasm between me and the guys in the platoon. I'm sitting there thinking I'm all hardcore, and they're looking at me like, "Oh, you think you're cool? You think you think what you're doing it makes you better than us? Cool. Guess what? We don't want to hang out with you." Now, the like simple immature attitude would be, screw those guys. They're not as hardcore as I am. That's why. Why should I try and... No. Actually, what I should try and do is build relationships with them and actually do a good job and actually conform so that I can influence them. Because if you're not in the group, you cannot influence the group. That's the main crux of it. If you're not in the group, you don't have any influence over the group.
For sure.
At all.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, certainly in any job, that was true for me in the Marine Corps. Is I'd show up and, look, there's something they're doing is good anyway. There's a reason you want to be on this team. They're doing bunch of things right. You want to show up and be on board that team and figure those things out. And if you figure out that they're doing things that aren't exactly right, if you recognize in your squadron or your team that they're kind of maybe off slightly in the wrong direction, you want to be able to put them in the right direction. You want to be able to lead and influence. Do that as an outsider. See how that works out for you.
See how good that goes.
Yeah, and there's a long-term balance there too, but when I say assimilate or get on board, it's really showing up. I'm like, hey, I'm here to be part of this team. And if I want to have some long-term success on this team, the first thing you got to be is on that team. And look, nobody at Echelon Front was like, we roll jiu-jitsu or you're out. There wasn't any of that. It was just, hey, that's what we do. And I started to piece together why we do it. And look, keep in mind, man, I mean, think of the first people I was on the mat with. The very first time I put on a rash guard and sat on a mat was when I recorded the first podcast with you, and then you left, and Echo and I rolled on whatever.
That's the first person you rolled with?
And the first, he was teaching me things like, when you fall on the ground, try to land on top of the other guy.
Yeah.
Like, okay, Roger, hang on, let me write that down.
Yeah.
Like rule number one. If you fall on the ground and you're on the bottom, try to roll over and get on top. It was, if you probably remember that, I mean, that was the first time I ever had any sort of direct instruction. So my experience and introduction to jiu-jitsu was Echo Charles, Jocko Willink, Leif Babin. There was zero thought in my mind like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. Echo's gonna be so impressed at my acumen as a brand new guy. So all that pressure was off. There was no.
You were just in a no pressure scenario.
Zero pressure, and it also was one of those things too that I did it because not because I wanted to fit in, because I wanted to figure out why were you guys doing this?
Yeah.
I knew why you used to do it. I mean, you explained that really clearly. And I remember being in a job where everything I did was towards the end of being good at that job. And I couldn't make that connection in my head yet. I'm like, training jiu-jitsu, like, what is being physically capable of doing that? How is that going to have anything to do with my job? Which in my mind, I made no connection to that. But guess what? You kept talking about it over and over again, and that was why I got into this. And that made it so much easier for me to understand why I was doing it, because for me, it was trying to figure out how you see and think the things that you do, and that made it a lot of fun. and don't get me wrong, man. I'm a grown man. I don't like losing at anything.
Yeah.
But the pieces of it wasn't. I just think I saw it a little bit differently because I was trying to figure out what it is that you were seeing. Because to be quite honest, man, I heard the words that you were saying. You say them a lot, but I didn't really understand that. I couldn't put myself in your shoes and see it through those eyes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, screw it. I'm going to just start doing this and see where it goes.
That's what we just talked about on the last podcast we recorded about, hey, when you're reading something, like it's one thing to read something, it's another thing to understand it, and it's another thing to actually put yourself into the mental state of what that individual's in. So I don't do a good enough job of articulating what jiu-jitsu is like for me, which meant that you were just looking at it like at this really, really shallow level because I'm just not good at communicating about it. And so you're trying to figure it out and figure out what the hell I'm talking about, and you go, you know what, this guy makes no sense, I'm just gonna try it. It was
this guy who I'm now working for keeps talking about this over and over and over again, because what he's saying, it actually makes sense what he's saying. I just had no frame of reference for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way I can actually take advantage of what you're saying without, it'd be like me talking to you about flying.
Yeah.
And trying to get you to understand that part of it. I just had to see it for myself. I didn't have this big vision of this being a journey. I had no vision of it influencing my life and my kids. That was never part of the plan. It was, all these guys are on board with this. This guy's on board with this. I hear it a lot. I simply have to see what it means. That was it.
You know what's interesting is when you explain things to me about being a fighter pilot, I'm 12 degrees separated from really understanding what you're talking about. When you explain it in jiu-jitsu terms, I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm only 6 degrees away. I mean, I'm not there, but I'm way closer than I would be. It's like I have English as a primary language, but I have a little bit of Spanish, and you have German as a primary language, but you have a little bit of Spanish. We can't speak to each other but in English to German. That doesn't work. Yeah. But we have that little secondary language that we can kind of connect on. Yeah. That's how much better I understand when you explain to me about being a fighter pilot. Now, we also have one other common language, and we have the common language of, well, we have two other common languages. We have a language of leadership, and we have a language of combat. So both of those are there, and that's why I think when we discuss something, like I can get pretty close to explaining something to you from a high-level jiu-jitsu, because we can talk about it from a leadership perspective. We can talk about it from a combat perspective, and then I can make some gross, really, really rudimentary attempt to explain it from a fighter pilot perspective. Mm-hmm. But when you put all those together, you get a decent translation of something, and it goes vice versa.
Absolutely.
So that's another key element. Is it gives you another metaphor for life and for business and for leadership.
That metaphor it's every bit as accurate as all the other ones, though. There aren't like pieces that are missing, and that's the part that became. That's the part that got my head so wrapped around it. Was the metaphor is. So you don't have to have a military experience. You don't have to be in combat. You don't have to even be in an organizational leadership position. If you have jiu-jitsu, the metaphor overlays perfectly on top of life. Yep. And that's the beauty of it. That's what's awesome. And that's why, and I see it all the time on social media. I'm a 46-year-old. I started jiu-jitsu. I'm like, yes, that's so good to go. Because your life is going to, not your jiu-jitsu life, your life is now going to get bigger. You're going to see things in a way you didn't see them before. I have the benefit of some combat. I have the benefits of some leadership, and there's a lot of overlap in our worlds. And this is just one more thing that fits. It's one more overlay on top of that. But that overlay is so, it's all there, man. That's what I like about it.
When we were doing the tactics manual on the Jocko podcast, man, the jiu-jitsu is jumping off the page at you, really. The jiu-jitsu is jumping off the page at you. And what's cool about it is you get this real world, pragmatic, factual thing that you feel. I mean, when someone passes your guard and defeats your defenses, you feel it. When somebody sets you up and then flanks you, you feel it's not theoretical. It's a factual thing that you know happened. You know that just the way I can pin someone down with fixing fires and then maneuver to their flank and destroy them, just like that's a real thing that can actually happen. But if you haven't been there, then it's just a theory. Well, if you do jiu-jitsu, it's not a theory anymore. It's a factual thing that just happened to you.
The only reason we did 8 hours of that. And I was thinking about it the whole time. And the only thing that keeps me from talking about it is just being hypersensitive to the fact that I'm so new at it. And I feel like such a novice that I kind of avoid talking about it because I don't want to look like I'm talking about something I think I know better than I do. But when you ask me, like, how often do you think, like, every single discussion in there's a jiu-jitsu connection to it. Everything. And I didn't say it just because I didn't want to say it every time, but not one example in all 8 of those chapters or was an immediately, and I actually am going to that more than I'm going to other places now because I do that.
Because you're doing it every day.
All the time. My connection is I was training with my kids on Saturday, and I was thinking about that when we were talking earlier today.
And this is why I cannot not give credit to jiu-jitsu because for providing me with a thread that tied everything together. It really did. I think if I didn't do jiu-jitsu, I don't think I would have put together the connections between combat, between leadership, and between dealing with human beings. I don't think I would have. I think it took me putting on jiu-jitsu sunglasses or whatever, jiu-jitsu tinted sunglasses, where when I looked, I saw that a flank on the battlefield with fixing fires was the same thing as going for a choke and then arm locking someone. And then seeing that in turn was, from a leadership perspective, hey, look, I'm not going to bark orders at my subordinates. I'm going to come in. I'm going to be here present and allow them to look at me, but I'm going to come in over here from the flank and plant these ideas in their head and let them be theirs. I just don't think I have the cognitive capacity to make those connections without something as physical and as real as what jiu-jitsu is. And so for me, it's been a huge thing. It's been a huge thing.
Yeah.
I also think from a insecurity/security perspective, when I was a kid, which means, under the age of 25, I would do things when I was 13, when I was 15, when I was 22. I would do things to prove myself either to my friends or to myself that I was tough, that I was hard. I would do things like that because I was insecure. Mm-hmm. And because I didn't know. And that's what I mean by insecure. I'm not talking about I was insecure like I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I'm talking about I just didn't know if I had what it took, right? I just didn't know that. You want to be tested. And so what do you do to prove that? Well, I'm going to get in a fight. I'm going to do this dangerous thing. I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do, whatever stupid. I'm going to drink until I black out. That's what I'm going to do. Oh, okay. Because that's going to prove that I can just go. I'm not afraid of anything. Watch this. I'm going to put poison into my body until I can't think anymore. Because that makes sense. But that's what I'm going to do to prove. And so when I started doing jiu-jitsu, all of a sudden it was like, oh, no. I'm proving to myself every day where I instead of me not knowing where I was, all of a sudden I knew where I was. And I knew that I wasn't the best. And I knew that I wasn't the worst. And I knew if I wanted to get better, I knew what I had to do to it. And just like I just said, when I realized that there was steps that I could take to improve my capability in jiu-jitsu, I realized that there were steps that I could take to improve my capability in tactics. And I realized that there were steps I could take to improve my capability as a leader. And all those, I don't know that I would have made those connections. I don't know that I would have realized how much information I can suck out of a first-person account of war if I didn't do jiu-jitsu. I don't know that I ever would have made that connection. Because I think that when I read a book, at this point in my life, I think that I am squeezing and just bludgeoning that document until it has nothing left in it. That's what I feel like I'm doing. At least that's what I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I could have done that if I wouldn't have realized that, hey, there is a method to get better at everything. I learned to learn from jiu-jitsu. Yeah. That's what I learned. I learned to learn from jiu-jitsu. I was never that good at anything else. I wasn't that good at sports. Well, I'll tell you why I wasn't good at sports. You want to know why I wasn't good at sports? I never practiced. I showed up at soccer season, put my cleats on and played soccer. I didn't drill. I wasn't in the off season doing movement drills. Like it just didn't make sense to me. I played basketball. I wasn't practicing foul shots and jump shots and playing pickup games all summer long. I wasn't. It didn't occur to me. When basketball season kicked off, there I was. So, but with jiu-jitsu, I was like, oh, here's the level I'm at. If I drill this move, I can do it to that guy tomorrow or the next day. And then I realized, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it right away, and there's little mistakes I'm going to make, and then that means I got to drill it more, and then I got to do it live. And even when I do it live, I'm not going to be successful every time. So guess what? I need to practice it more live. And as I put that together, that there is a way to improve yourself. And then I realized there's a way to improve my tactics, a way to improve my leadership. There's a way to improve my life.
Yeah, it's a template for life. That whole conversation I'm thinking about, that's the same way you get better at life.
Yeah.
At everything. That's how you get better at life.
Yeah. You make attempts, you fail, you iterate, you change, you make adaptations, you do it again.
Yeah, and you have to have the humility to you said, I know where I am. You have to have the humility to recognize where you are. and that you can and actually need to get a lot better. And that knowing where you are in life and not being satisfied with where you are in life, I mean, that's the template. And you know what? It doesn't hurt to start life over at 45 as a white belt in whatever it is you're a white belt in. For me, it was being a white belt in Jiu Jitsu. I'm like, oh, this is actually really good for me to start over at the beginning. You don't need to be a kid to be at the beginning of something. And that template fits everywhere in my life. And it doesn't just make me better at it doesn't just make me better at Jiu Jitsu. It makes me a better parent. It makes me a better husband. I'm certainly a lot better of a leadership instructor. I'm a lot better in a lot of things. But the things that I actually value the most, being a good parent, being a good husband, this makes me better at that. And just think about that for a second. That training jiu-jitsu makes me a better parent. And that was the connection that I heard people talking about, but I couldn't make the connection. So I had to see it myself. And what's allowed me to do is open the door and walk inside and go, oh my God, it's all in here somewhere. And I like being in there. And that's why I kind of explained earlier, losing doesn't bother me the way that when I was a kid, when I lost, I would get mad and I would cry and get upset. It's a totally different feeling. It's being there doing that is the thing that I like the most. It's good to go, man.
Well, with that, coming up on an hour. So that's awesome. Good for today. Echo's at Echo Charles on social media. Dave's at David R. Berke on social media. I'm at Jocko Willink. If you need any stuff for your jiu-jitsu, you can go to originmain.com. If you need any supplements or food type, you can go also get that from originmain.com. And if you want to check out, I have a different podcast that's called Jocko Podcast, and you can check that one out too. Anything else, Echo?
Negative.
Dave?
Negative.
All right. Stay grounded, everyone.